8:15 now. Getting a foothold on the property ladder isn't easy, but now KiwiSaver is saying, well, hey, why don't you go and buy a house with a friend? Is it a good idea? We've got an expert with us this morning to help outline the pros and cons of co-owning a home with your friends. Solicitor Duncan Lang joins us. Hey, Duncan.
Hi, good to meet you both.
So it's not just KiwiSaver, but KiwiSaver is deliberately marketing their mortgages with this idea that you can go in with a friend, right?
Yeah, Kiwibank have discussed it directly, but it doesn't. It's not something that's exclusive purely to Kiwibank. I mean, technically you can pull multiple parties together to purchase a property, but the key thing is really that you have the funds to A, be able to buy the property in the first place and put down a deposit, but B, service the mortgage that most people will register against the property to be able to afford the purchase price.
And are you seeing more people do this? And what are some of the things that they need to think about before deciding to go down this route?
Yeah, it is becoming a lot more common. I mean, compared to say 10 years ago when it was largely family or partners that were purchasing property, because of, the increasing property market and how much housing generally costs in New Zealand, you are seeing people pull together with their friends. The key things really to consider at the outset is having a bit of transparency with your friends about how much money they can really put forward to help service the mortgage, because obviously at the end of the day, although friends might buy a share in the property and have their own share each, the mortgage is over the property as a whole. And so if you have friends who might accidentally skip a payment, or they may not have the funds available to help meet a mortgage payment, the bank can go after everybody who owns the property to recover that debt. So there is a bit of risk there. And there are some agreements that you can enter into with your friends just to, I guess, cover off on those bases and provide some mechanisms just in case things like that happen.
So don't invite the loose friend into the...
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that you can do.
Look at the friends that have quite stable jobs and income, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, getting a bit of an idea in terms of how frequently they're getting money in. Say, for example, if somebody's a contractor, they might get a big flux of cash in at one point, but they might go through a bit of a slow period where they're not getting money coming in. So it's really considering that and then weighing up the bases about whether or not the risk that you take on can be justified by, who you're entering into it with.
Do you know if the banks are looking at, are assessing the affordability of two friends in the same way that they would assess the affordability of a couple?
I think generally banks approach things pretty objectively. They look at what money is available up front for a deposit to make sure that you tick those boxes, but also at the same time they look at long-term the purchaser's ability to service the mortgage that they have. Generally, if they feel comfortable with that, the trend is that they'll proceed forward. However, in specific circumstances where you may have a bit more risks, like I mentioned before with contractors, they may look to see if there's other ways they can secure a property, such as maybe looking at a guarantee from a third party, like a person's parents, and then also consider the value of the property and how easily they'll be able to recover.
So it's more to do with the nature of your work or your ability to repay than it is the relationship type. Whether you're a married couple or whether you are two friends, to the bank it doesn't really matter as much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the bank generally won't discriminate on the relationship of the purchasers. They'll look at the facts they have available to them and they'll go, right, we can tick these boxes and we can proceed. Or they'll go, there's a little bit of extra risk there. How can we help to mitigate that?
Because what lasts longer, marriages or friendships?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, probably some friendships for a lot of people.
Some would, yeah.
Unless you're buying a house with them, because then that then does change the friendship a little bit. And what happens when somebody wants to sell, or, in a terrible case, somebody might pass away, or what happens then?
There are kind of a couple of considerations there. So with passing away, first thing to really think about is it does to a degree go back to how the property is owned. So generally you'll see two different ownership structures. You'll see people own a property as joint tenants or as tenants in common. And so joint tenants, if one of the property owners does pass away, their interest in the property automatically transfers to the other owners. Whereas if you enter into a property as tenants in common, you'll find that the individual purchaser's interest in the property is registered on the title, and then that interest can be transferred to another person through somebody's will.
Okay. Are you mostly getting young people doing this, or is it all ages? Because, yeah, I mean,
it can be a bit of
struggling.
Can be a bit of both. I mean, generally you'll see young people, because obviously taking that leap to get that deposit together. I mean, if you look in Auckland, on average, deposit for a purchase is about $200,000 for that 20% mark. However, I have had clients who, are of the older generation that have entered into agreements because, they're either downsizing or they're looking to purchase maybe an investment property or, a second property such as a batch or a holiday home. So it does sort of fluctuate still.
Yeah.
KiwiSaver, is that easy to access if you were doing it with a friend?
You would access your own independent KiwiSavers for the purchase, and there are some requirements up front. So you need to fill out certain documentation and provide that documentation to your KiwiSaver provider. But you'll also see, for the most part, that you'll need to provide a signed sale and purchase agreement as well. The interesting thing that you do need to keep in mind is that because KiwiSavers are independent from each other, you need to make sure you coordinate nice and early before a settlement date. Generally, you'll be looking at about 10 working days that they give to release those KiwiSaver funds.
But there'd be no difference between a married couple and two friends accessing their individual KiwiSavers to do that?
No, so long as you're using your KiwiSaver for the purchase of your first home, or there's other certain instances where you can use it, your KiwiSaver provider will go, right, we've ticked all the boxes,
Sweet.
Here's your money.
Hey, Levi has emailed in as you've been talking, and he says, I bought a house with my brother 2 years ago. Good morning, Levi. I do not recommend this. Since then, he hasn't paid his half of any bills. He's kept insurance money meant for repairs and won't let me sell or buy me out. So basically, I now have to go to a lawyer to take my brother to court to get me out of this. Buying together doesn't always work out. I wish I had help and advice to not do this in the first place. So what would, if Levi came to see you and said, let's go back 2 years.
Yes.
This is Levi before he went insane, dealing with his brother. What would you have advised him?
I think, generally when you're purchasing property with parties that aren't super close to you, or, in some instances your siblings as well, seeking what's called a property sharing agreement can be quite important, because then, when it comes further down the line, and I'm sure Levi at the start thought, there's never going to be any issues between me and my brother. A property sharing agreement can provide certain mechanisms and terms that dictate things such as how the outgoings are paid, how the property is maintained, and then also it provides an exit strategy just in case one of the people who own the property actually do want to sell their share. And so having that agreement in place just provides a bit of clarity, and it can avoid awkward situations or disputes further down the line. So I'd recommend, before you even realistically look at purchasing a property, having a discussion with who you're buying it with, getting, some general consensus about those sort of terms and conditions, so that, if there are issues further down the track, you've got this agreement in place that gives you an out without having to argue any further.
Thank you very much for joining us with that. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people out there who have found that very useful. That's solicitor Duncan Lang joining us on AM 7 away from 8 now.
Would you trust buying a house with me?
I was just actually thinking about that, sitting there thinking, I wonder if we'd ever...
I wouldn't be doing any of the cleaning or maintenance.
Yeah, well, yes. There would have to be agreements in place for that, I think.
I think I could buy one with you.
Yeah. It's not so much the buying. The buying's fine. It's could I live with you? That's the issue.
Well, true. It has to be a bloody big house.